So I just want to thank you guys. You guys are amazing. When I floated the idea last week of doing a deep dive into investigating the murder of my friend Elva, it was purely just a thought. Like, what I use this platform for is really it's just like mementos of my life, and it's as much for myself as it is for anyone else. And so when I have thoughts, I lots of times will post them just to help me remember later down the road where I was at a given moment. And so I posted it and hadn't decided yet whether or not I was going to do anything with it. And since that post, the number of you that have stepped up and asked to help me with researching it or have made suggestions, I've been bowled over. Thank you all so much. And I still haven't decided if I'm going to move forward with this. Beginning the process of research has really stirred up a lot of emotions around this that I had forgotten existed. And it's been a painful week, but also a powerful one. And I thought that maybe one of the things that I should do before I decide one way or the other is give you guys a little bit of a sense of who Elva was, what role we played in one another's lives, and why she deserves to have her case solved so very much, because it's been over 30 years and it's past due. So Elva was my friend for several years. When I moved from North Carolina to Maryland, my parents were getting separated, or they were separated. It happened very suddenly. My grandmother showed up one morning from Delaware, and evidently my mother had made the decision to leave my father once and for all, and had told my grandmother but hadn't told us. And so we woke up, the cops were there with my grandmother and my uncle and a bodyguard and a moving truck. And we were told to grab whatever we wanted. The cops took my father off the property. And in a split instant, my entire world shifted. And it was hard. I moved from North Carolina to Delaware to live with my grandmother. And then my mother found a job in Maryland and a rental house. And so we moved into the rental house. And it was very cute. It was the summer property for a family. And so they would come down and live there in the summer. It was on the waterfront. And then on the summers, we would live somewhere else. But we lived there for several years. And I met Elva on the school bus going home. Her house was not far away from where I lived, and so we were on the same bus route. And she was one of those people that just made friends incredibly easily. Yeah, I love on true crime shows where people always say, oh, she lit up a room when she entered it. And Elva was not like that. She was different. She didn't light up the room. She electrically charged it. She had so much energy in her tiny little body, and she was very petite. But she was just this huge bundle of energy. She was just a firecracker. And for a kid that was really struggling to fit in, I had this deep Southern accent, and everybody made fun of me for it. And my body was just starting to develop, and so I had no idea what to do with all these curves. I didn't fit in. All these kids had known each other since the beginning of school. And here I am with this weird body, this weird accent, and my home life is falling apart. And I was dealing with a lot. So I started talking with Elva on the school bus, and we quickly realized that her parents managed the care of horses at a farm that was adjacent to where my mom lived. And to give you a little bit of sense of the town that we grew up in, it's called Chesapeake City in Maryland, and it's beautiful. It's this gorgeous little quaint village, all these old houses along the waterfront, and Chesapeake City spans two different sides of the C&D Canal. And C&D stands for Chesapeake and Delaware. It was a hand-dug canal that ran from the Chesapeake Bay through to the Delaware River. And so what it does is it enables big shipping ships, barges to go through, like the one that you saw that crashed into the bridge in Baltimore a few weeks ago. So growing up in this town, it's beautiful, it's very small, and everyone that lives there either has a boat or a boater's license or grew up around the waterfront. Like, it was just one of those things that we did a lot of. Everyone plays in the water, fishes, whatever. It's part of the life there. And in the summer, the area surges with this huge influx of people who come in to have fun on the waterfront. But in the winter, it's pretty dead. So Elva lived not far from me, and her parents managed this farm part-time because they both had full-time jobs. And Elva started bringing horses over for me to ride. And what we quickly realized is that the house that I lived at was on this cove. The cove wrapped around. And then on the very next cove was the farm that Elva's parents worked at. And so there was marshland between the two, but right up against the waterfront, there was a trail that ran through. And so she would go down to the cove, ride over, bring horses over, and we would ride. And it was wonderful. For a kid that's struggling with their life falling apart and dealing with her parents, going through all of the ups and downs of divorce, my father would show up randomly. He would come visit. Things would be so wonderful for a little bit, and then the abuse would start again. And then he would leave, and then he'd come back, and it was on and off for quite a while. And so having Elva show up with horses for us to just go ride was amazing. It was that moment of wild freedom from all of the pressures that I was trying to figure out at home. And at the time when my father wasn't there, my mother would go out. She'd go out partying. She would date, and she was kind of living her second childhood. And so I was trying to figure out how to maintain stability at home for me and my sister, because there wasn't a lot of stability. And I was just trying to figure out how to nail that down and not let things get just too out of hand. So the moments with Elva were amazing. And she would consistently bring me this buckskin quarter horse mare named Dolly. And Dolly was big, and she was solid, and she was incredibly kind. And then Elva would show up on whatever feisty, fiery animal needed exercise that day. And so usually they were thoroughbreds. Often they were horses that her parents raced. And she would come, and we would go out riding, and Elva, without fail, her horse would start to buck, and it was amazing to watch her because she would stick like glue to that saddle. She was an amazing natural rider, and it was just beautiful to watch. And it was wonderful. We would go out on the levees where it's wild and it's open, and you just have these huge spaces where there's nothing around but scrub brush and trees, and we would just let the horses go. And it was amazing. Whatever horse she was on would beat Dolly easily. But still, being out there and wild and free with her was the moments where I felt like life was manageable, and it was incredibly freeing to be out there and be wild with her. And so, not that long after that, my father had his accident. I talk about it on and off again, but he was struck by a drunk driver while he was on a motorcycle. He ended up with a severe head injury, and he lost his left eye. And that was another big shift in my life because suddenly we were spending all of our spare time at the rehab hospital, and I was trying to navigate life with a father with a head injury. And as abusive and as harsh as he had been before the accident, he was still my father, and I still loved him deeply. And so watching him go through the challenges of learning how to walk again and how to tie his shoes and all of the little and big challenges that he went through, plus the head injury had stripped away some of the kinder aspects of his personality. And it had left him just pretty rough and pretty harsh. And so I was dealing with that and trying to figure out how to navigate that. And I still didn't fit in at the school because most of the kids there had been there since kindergarten. It was very cliquey. I had this deep Southern accent, so I stood out that way. I had this body that was starting to develop all these crazy curves, and no one else in my class had any of those. And so that was a whole other weird dynamic because I didn't want it. I just wanted to be normal and fit in. That was all I wanted. And I could not fit in no matter how hard I tried. But when I was with Elva, it didn't matter. I didn't have to fit in. I could just be wild and free. And it didn't matter what I looked like or what I sounded like. We could just be real and open with one another. So we get to high school and we both play field hockey. And one night I went over to Elvis to spend the night. And she said, "Hey, I'll tell you what, there's a party happening at one of the marinas. Why don't we go?" And I was like, okay, I'd never been to a party before. It sounded fun. We got dressed up. We snuck out. And when we got there, it was pretty wild. There was drugs going on. There was all kinds of craziness. And I didn't feel safe. The way that guys were looking at us and whatnot, I didn't feel safe. And so I said to Elva, "I think I'm going to sneak out and go back to your house." And she got really upset with me. And we ended up having this big fight. And I was like, I'm just going home. I don't want to fight. I don't want to do any of this. I'm just going to head home. And she was furious. And so she left with me. We went back to her house, and along the way we had this huge fight, and she was screaming at me, and it was not good. So I went home that night, and after that our friendship shifted. I still cared about her. We still rode every once in a while, but not like we used to. I didn't go with her to the racing barn any longer. But we would chat from time to time. And one day, Elva came in, and her parents had bought her a horse named Maid of Metal. And as I mentioned, Elva loved metal, and Maid's name was perfect for her. But she had been out riding Maid. And in the area that I grew up, Alaire DuPont is, or at least she was, a huge presence. She owned one of the big horse farms in the area and was really big in the racing industry. And everybody knew who Mrs. DuPont was. She would drive these old escort station wagons that were falling apart. And she was just famous for the fact that she loved animals and loved horses, and that was the whole focus of her life. So Elva was out riding Maid one day in one of the fields along Town Point Road, and Mrs. DuPont happened to be riding by and pulled over her car and talked with Elva for a while and said, "You know what, I want you to come ride for me when you're ready." And I remember Elva pulling me aside at school to tell me about this, and it was amazing. Like, she was so electrified over it. And I was both incredibly proud of her and incredibly jealous. Because one of the things we bonded over was we both wanted to be a jockey. And Elva stayed small and lean and had the perfect built for it, and she was such a natural rider that it was perfect for her. And I was super curvy, and no matter what I did, I just kept getting curvier. And it was, it just probably would have never been a reality for me. And so I was so proud that one of us got to even start out on that path. And I was so jealous because I was like, oh man, that's going to be amazing. But Elva was so excited, and it was wonderful. It was the dream opportunity. And so like it seemed when she dropped out of school, and I believe our sophomore year, I figured she was going to go and start riding seriously. I don't know if that's what she was going to do or not, but in my mind, it was logical that that's what she was going to do. And I know that she was still partying pretty heavily and having a lot of fun. And when I heard that she had been killed, I couldn't believe it, because she was so alive and just so indomitable. She had that personality that you knew that life was never going to dominate her. And so I couldn't imagine someone being able to kill her. I couldn't. And so when I went to the funeral, and there she was, this tiny little person in the coffin, and she had been beaten so badly that her face didn't look like hers at all. It was so puffy. And they put this huge wig on her that didn't look like her at all. And it was just, it didn't feel real. And when her mom, Janice, saw me, she came over and she grabbed me and held on to me so tightly. She said in my ear, "Caroline, I don't know what we're going to do with Maid." And it was, to know Elva, that was like such the obvious question, because she loved Maid so much, and Maid was her soul horse. Like they just connected. When Elva was on Maid, you could see that they were just two parts of the same spirit. And as a parent, I can't imagine having your daughter's horse there and looking at it every day and knowing that the other half is missing. But I also can't imagine getting rid of her. And I don't know what I would do in that situation, but she held me so tight. Elva's mom held me so tight. And we cried together. And it didn't feel real. And Elva was the first person my age that I knew of that died. And to lose her in such a horribly violent way, but so suddenly, it still doesn't make sense. And then to know that someone out there knows what happened, but they've chosen not to help her have the closure that she deserves. It's just so unfair. I mean, and I get it. She was fiery, and who knows? It could have been a fight that went wrong. She had no problems throwing down when she felt like things weren't going the way she wanted them to. And Elva wasn't someone who liked to hear the word no. So who knows what happened? But she deserves closure. And I don't know anything about researching a cold case. I don't know anything about researching a warm case. But I do know that Elva deserves justice. And I don't know if I can do anything but I've got this platform and I've got the support of all of you guys. And I figured that together, if even we can move this forward just a little bit, she deserves that. So that is why I'm considering taking on Elva's case. And that's why it means so much to me. Those of you that have stepped up and started researching this, I appreciate that so much. And if anyone knows how to submit a FOIA for the information that the police have, I would love that. If anyone knows how to reach out to the coroner who did her autopsy, I would appreciate that. If anyone knows anything, if you're watching this and you know of anything, even if it's just rumors, let me know, because I know that people know, and I know the truth is out there. There's a lot of rumors as far as who's done what, but someone knows the truth. And it's been too long. It needs to come out. And if anyone's got suggestions on how we coordinate this, I'm all ears, because I have no idea what I'm doing. But I love Elva, and she deserves this. So I thank you guys for your support and your help in this.